Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a multifaceted professional, an Olympian, and an author from Las Vegas, USA, Mr. John K. Coyle. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Well,
Did I say that right?
that's okay. John is the founder and chief executive officer of the Art of Really Living. He's a champion athlete and an Olympic medalist. So, John, before we come to your book, a few questions for you. You've had an incredibly diverse career from being an Olympic medalist to an Emmy-winning producer, a Fortune 500 executive, a professor, an author, and a keynote speaker. If you had to choose one defining moment that set the trajectory for your life, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. And trajectory setting is what I talk about a lot in the
Correct.
work I do these days. But I would probably say one of the biggest ones was actually, I'll tell you the most important one. And the Greeks had a word for this, by the way, trajectory setting moments. They call them Kairos moments.
Right.
And the most important Kairos moment for me was not the Olympics.
Hmm.
It was after failing to make my second Olympics.
Okay.
And so I was competing until I'm 30 years old. I've never had a real job,
Mm.
but I wanted to win a gold medal. I'd won a silver medal. I wanted to win a gold medal, and I competed for a second Olympics, and I failed. I didn't make the team. I did not win a gold medal, and so I became, in my mind, a one-timer first loser.
Mm. Wow.
And so that's the way I remained for the next 8, 10 years
Mm.
in my head until I was invited to be the analyst for NBC Sports, US-based broadcasting that does
Yeah.
the Olympics. And I, of course, wouldn't say no to that. So I'm back at the Olympics, not competing anymore. And I was at dinner the night before the gold medal round, doing my job, which was to interview the parents and coaches and get the backstories to feed to the commentators. And as I'm sitting at dinner, a parent looked at me across the table. He said, "John, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you something."
Mm.
He looked nervous and he was making me nervous, but we walked away from the table and he said, "I just want you to hear this, that we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you."
Wow.
And I said, I don't know what you mean. He said, "You may not remember, but 12 years ago, after you won your silver medal, you brought it to a little reception in Bay City, Michigan. I brought my son Alex. He was 11 at the time.
Mm.
He'd never skated before. The next day, he joined the Bay City Speed Skating Club. And tomorrow, he is skating in the gold medal final."
Incredible. Wow. What a story. Thank you.
And the entire trajectory of my life changed. Up
Mm.
until then, I didn't talk about speed skating. I had nothing to do with it. Now I speak about it. I've told this story to more than 100,000 people in 19 countries around the world. So,
Amazing.
yeah, that was probably the most important moment of my current career for sure.
Fascinating. John, many people measure success by titles and achievements, and you have plenty in your journey. But your journey suggests a deeper philosophy. How has your definition of success evolved over the years?
It started out obviously as an athlete, as achievement in sports, and then in business for a while, it was achievement in financial and titles. But I did eventually come to the conclusion, which is the underpinning of everything, and I do, and I talk about these days, that time is our ultimate currency.
Mm.
That time freedom,
Mm.
time capital are most important investments
Mm.
because you can't bring it with you. Financial returns don't mean anything when you're not healthy enough or alive enough to use them, but
Mm.
time
Mm.
is our most important currency. And when we learn how to invest that wisely, that's the biggest flex
Mm.
in the universe.
Very interesting. Let's now talk about the art of storytelling and time expansion, since you just spoke about time.
Yeah,
And my question is, what makes a story truly unforgettable? And what role does vulnerability play in great storytelling?
great question. I think storytelling might be the most important leadership skill today.
Hmm.
Got all this technology, we got AI, we got all these other things, but we know from behavioral psychology that 95% of human action is driven by emotions. So I can throw you facts and logic all day, and you're not going to do anything with it. I can analyze things to, a million pieces, nobody cares. But if you can grasp people emotionally,
Mm.
then and only then can you affect change in people's lives in terms of your leadership, in terms of the teams you're leading, in terms of the
Mm.
company you're leading. And I think storytelling is the one most powerful, legitimate way to do
Mm.
that. Because
Correct.
you can tell if you can tell a powerful story that's real, that's true, and based in real solid statistics,
Hmm.
nobody can argue with that.
Right. Amazing. You're also known for framing talks through the hero's journey.
Yes.
Why do you think this narrative structure resonates so deeply with audiences across cultures?
So the hero's journey, for those that aren't familiar, also called the monomyth, is a form of structured storytelling that's probably been around for 20 or 30,000 years, maybe longer. We don't really know.
Hmm.
The hero's journey, it underpins almost every great story ever told, all the way back to the first prehistoric stories that were passed orally for at least 3, 5, 10,000 years. We're not sure.
Mm.
Epic of Gilgamesh being the first written. They all follow the same format. So Epic of Gilgamesh, the Odyssey, the Iliad, moving into modern times, the Matrix, Star Wars, Harry Potter. It doesn't matter. All great stories have this structure of the hero's journey, which starts with sort of being in the normal realm, having a call to an adventure, refusing the call, meeting with a mentor, crossing into some new world where you're faced with adversaries and allies, and then you're approaching this sort of crisis near-death moment, out of which you are then resurrected, or you come back to life where you reap the rewards, but you return home forever changed. This is
Mm.
every great story ever told.
Mm.
I do all of my talks. I've done 5 TED Talks. All the speeches I do for corporate keynotes or conferences follow the hero's journey because I think that we are hardwired for
Mm.
20, 30,000 years to remember a certain format of a story. And I
Mm.
think your listeners, if they put their stories into the hero's journey, people will remember them as well.
Fascinating. Many leaders struggle to tell stories that connect emotionally. What's one practical exercise you recommend to improve storytelling skills?
Well, there needs to be a crisis in your story. That's what people tend
Correct.
to ignore,
Correct.
right? All great stories have a plot. All plots have a crisis. If you don't have a crisis, you don't have a plot. If you don't have a plot, you don't have a story. If you don't have a story, nobody's going to remember it.
Mm.
Therefore, you must have a crisis as a part of your story.
Yeah.
People tend to shy away from that, but if you can tell a customer journey, for example, that has a crisis in it, that's what people will remember.
Mm. You often blend data driven frameworks into emotional storytelling. How do you strike the right balance between facts and feelings?
That's a great question. I sort of joke that I Trojan horse into conversations or speeches with the people I speak to. Um, I always start with a framework, right? So we got to get past this prefrontal cortex, sort of
Mm.
the lawyer that's judging everything rationally. You have to establish that you have a real data-driven framework that is, based in solid data, and then and only then do you have sort of permission to enter the
Mm.
back brain and start to tell stories. So I'll
Mm.
start with the framework, design thinking, or some sort of neuroscience framework, and then I move fairly quickly into a story that illuminates the framework I just set up. So if you
Mm.
can start with a rational, analytical, data-driven framework and then move that into a story that supports it, you've
Mm.
sort of covered all your bases and you have permission to
Mm.
then activate the nether regions of the brain.
Mm. Great response. And how do you adapt a story for a corporate boardroom versus the university class versus a TEDx stage?
I'm going to tell you my opinion here. It may not fly with everybody.
Yeah.
I think all great stories fly everywhere.
Hmm.
I don't have to. I'm about to let a secret out, but I don't change my stories for
Okay.
my. I
Mm.
speak to universities. Speak to high school students. I speak to groups of CEOs. They're identical. The
Mm.
talks are identical because I think
Okay.
human stories are universal, and if you can tap into that, you don't need to change your story.
Mm. And can you share a time when a personal story you told completely shifted the mindset of your audience?
Sure, sure. One of the talks that I give is around identifying and designing your life, your career, your team, your enterprise for your strengths
Mm.
and designing around your weaknesses. Critical to that, of course, is you have to know what they are,
Mm.
which is the hard part for I think for a lot of people. I'll loan you my cocktail question, which is, what are you best at?
Mm.
Well, if you don't know your superpower, you don't get to put on the cape. So I was speaking in an audience one time, and a woman was like, we were talking about strengths and weaknesses and how they tend
Okay.
to be facets of the same thing. So you might be calm, but you're also unemotional. You might be creative, but you're probably disorganized. You might be good with big picture strategy and patterns, and
Mm,
you're probably bad with details. You might be detail oriented, and you're probably a perfectionist. And you might be direct and honest, but you're probably also blunt and rude. I could go on all
mm,
day.
mm,
Point being that strengths and weaknesses have facets of each other. A lady raised her hand in an audience of 200, which doesn't happen very often. And I was like, let me guess, direct, honest, blunt, and rude. And she's like, yeah, how'd you
mm.
know? Because that's the only person that's going to raise their hand. She's
Right,
like, yeah, well, I don't think this is going to work for me. I
right.
said, well, she's like, I'm like, what do you do? She's like, I
Mm,
don't think my environment is conducive to your idea.
mm,
I don't think I can design for my strengths and design around my weaknesses. I don't think
mhm,
that's going to work. And
mm,
I said, okay, what do you do? And she said, I'm
mm,
a private school teacher in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which in the United States is like the kindest, gentlest state and
correct.
place to be. So nobody wants direct, honest, blunt, rude in a private parochial religious school for small kids, right? Like
Mm,
that's not a strength that's valued. And I
mm,
said, you know what? No, that's never going to work there. I'm telling you right now, you probably need a new job. Teaching is your passion, then fine, but you're going to probably need to be in upstate New York at a boarding school where parents and kids are used to having hard conversations and being
mm,
challenged.
mm.
So that was it. 7 years later, I get a LinkedIn message from her saying, I moved to New York, I'm working at a boarding school, and the kids love it when I challenge them. And I was like,
Wow.
yes,
Yes. Well done. Thank you. John, you've said time is not linear,
correct.
yet we live it as it is. Why is that a problem for how we live and work?
I think that the notion that the clock and its second is the same as the last is the same as the next one is a complete misnomer. We both know everybody experiences time speeding up, slowing down. You don't know where the
Mm,
day went. Can't believe that was last week. It was yesterday. Can't believe it was yesterday. It was last week. Can't believe that was last year.
mm,
Feels like last week, right? We get all these weird, our brains construct time out of
mm,
memories.
mm,
And this can be a first for most people in this audience because I'm the only one to talk about that. If you can accept the premise that memories are the currency of time, was it written? Was it stored? Was it
mm,
recalled? All three are
mm,
important.
mm,
More memories equals more time.
mm,
Same as money in your bank. Your financial capital is money. Your time capital is memories. More memories equals more time. So the way we experience time doesn't matter. And so giving away a chapter in my book, but the really the sum of the whole book is that the value of an increment of time
mm,
is not related to its duration. We sometimes experience,
mm,
or in a moment, more meaning, more trajectory setting, more future rechanging elements take place in moments often than sometimes in weeks or months or years.
mm,
You asked her out or you didn't. She said yes or she didn't. You avoided the car accident or you didn't. You got off the exit or you didn't. You took the job across town or you didn't. You quit your job and started a podcast called The Brand Called You or you didn't. You wrote 7 books or you did, right? Like all of these decisions tend to take place in small moments. The
mm,
work and the time leading up to and after are, of course, expansive. But the notion, as you started us out with these Kairos moments, trajectory changing moments,
mm,
that's what life is about. More of those equals more life equals more time.
mm,
That's really the premise.
mm. And therefore, a follow-up question for you is that some people seem to have all the time in the world and they're very effective, and some
Yes.
people don't seem to have any time in the world and they're struggling. Why
Yes.
is it that? Why does that happen?
Well, there's 168 hours in the week.
Correct.
We got to sleep, 50, 60 of those, right? So, but still 108 hours.
Yeah,
So if you're working 40, if you're working 60 hours, there's still a lot of time left,
I agree.
right? But again, if time only really matters in moments, a couple of moments here or there in a week can define the week,
Hmm.
right? So you might be hanging out playing games or reading books to your toddler for an hour or two a day, every day,
Hmm.
or multiple hours, but she comes out of her bedroom in tears one time and you give her the hug. That's a more important moment probably than the
Absolutely.
entire week. And
Absolutely.
that follows through adult life, right?
Hmm.
Saying the right thing to the right person at the right time. I mean, that whole conversation at dinner that changed my whole life happened in 20 seconds.
Yeah,
The entire trajectory of my life. So
absolutely.
the people that I think that miss out are playing the clock time game, trying to jam more stuff
Hmm.
into the hours without recognizing the important moments that really actually matter.
Amazing. John, you've spoken to me about Kairos, but you also speak about Chronos.
Yes.
What is the difference between these, and how can understanding these change the perception in our life?
In English, at least, time is the most common word other than a, and the.
Yeah.
And we make it work too hard. It's the only word we have for time. The Greeks had two.
Yeah.
Kairos, which we've already talked about, it's human time. And the deeper meaning is when everything happens at once and the trajectory is reset. And
Mm,
the etymology comes from the archer releasing the arrow, right? You
mm,
move that arrow just up or down and everything changes different ways.
mm,
Chronos is clock time. Unfortunately, we labor under I think, the completely inaccurate assumption that clock time is what matters. It does
mm,
not.
mm,
Yes, it gets your plane on time, your train on time, you get to the meetings on time, but the whole 60-minute or 2 hour meeting might hinge on saying these three words
mm,
at 42 minutes and 26 seconds in, and nothing else matters. And the entire meeting, other than saying the right thing at the right time to the right person, that's how time actually works.
mm. Fascinating. Is time expansion more about creating new experiences or about being more present in the ones we already have?
It is both.
Okay.
It is absolutely both. So,
Mm,
the way that the brain writes time or writes memories, which become time,
mm,
has a lot to do with the environmental factors that you're in. Uniqueness is clearly an important one,
mhm,
right? If everything is the same every day, your brain gets lazy. It's 3% of your mass, 28% of your calorie burn. It's not going to write it down. If you ever got to your parking garage or your work and you don't know how you got there, that's because the brain was like, nothing new to write down, so it just
mm,
did. So uniqueness is important. An element that people don't like but is true is risk and uncertainty is also important,
mm,
right? Your brain wakes up for things that are scary and interesting, fun, exciting, you know? So risk and uncertainty, uniqueness, they're different. They sound similar, but they're different. You
mm,
can have risk and uncertainty every day. That's not unique. Uh, Emotional intensity and presence. If you're not emotionally present, you're not writing it down. When you're emotionally present and you move into the flow state, which is one of the other categories, you emit dopamine and serotonin that actually increases the likelihood you're going to store and recall those memories. You actually multiply your memory recall by 4 to 5 times in the flow state.
mm,
And then, we want beauty, not tragedy. So tragedy also works, trauma also works, but it's designed for beauty. So when you
mm,
have uh, some uniqueness, some risk and uncertainty, some emotional intensity and presence. When you have some beauty and when you have the flow state on top of all that, those are the kinds of moments where there's a before and after, and time is so expansive
mm.
that a minute can be worth as much as a month or even a year.
Fascinating. You've spoken about creating the first recall, so you become the first call.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on how this works in business relationships?
Yes. So this is sort of the business side of all of this.
Hmm.
We know how memories are written, stored, and recalled. We know the elements that lead to highly recallable memories.
Hmm.
When it comes to business, if you're creating an experience, if you have a hotel, if you have an admission theme park, if you're having a meeting, if you're doing a sales call, if you can design some of these elements into this conversation, this meeting, this experience, then you can become that first memory when people
Hmm.
are hearkening back to, all right, we talked to 7 salespeople, but remember that one guy? He
Hmm.
did or said this.
Yeah.
If you become first recall, you're probably going to be the first call,
Hmm.
unless you left a negative memory. That'll also
Absolutely.
be recalled. You don't
Amazing.
want that one.
Yeah, and that's, so true in life, and yet you've explained it so simply and so easily. Thank you. I have time for two more questions for you.
Yes, sir.
John, in a fast-paced digital world, how do we protect ourselves from time collapse, where months or years seem to vanish?
That's a great question. And I work with CEOs, work with a lot of senior folks, particularly in the corporate environments. The entrepreneurs are a little different, but when you're in a corporate environment where you go to the same place with the same job, with the same people, the same commute, the same places for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like your routine starts to take over. Maybe the business challenges change somewhat, but by and large, most of your day becomes not unique.
Hmm.
And maybe for some very comfortable, which means
Yeah.
there's no risk and uncertainty either. And
Hmm.
so you're starting to take away all of the key things that lead to memories. And I've had CEOs tell me and other people in corporate environments say, I don't remember the 2000s. So they lost an entire decade,
Yeah.
right? And maybe that's okay. I sometimes call that investment time. If
Hmm.
work is your investment time and you're checking the boxes and paying the bills, take that money, time and money are fungible. Trade that money for time.
Mm.
Design an experience for your family, your extended family. Take everybody to go, I don't know, to some country nobody's ever been to before. Go see some incredible ruins in Rome, or go to Jordan and see Petra, or you know what I mean? Go somewhere
Yeah,
super different and unique, and you'll never forget those experiences.
fascinating. And my last question for you, for someone listening today who feels that their life is speeding by, what is the first step they should take to reclaim and expand their time?
The way I sort of think about it is truly expansive time, time, accretive moments, time dilating moments, because of the risk and uncertainty elements and uniqueness elements, they tend to be stressful. They don't always, like sometimes you can go watch a symphony or see a sunset and it's
Yeah,
really amazing and you're not necessarily under duress, but the risk and uncertainty is going to wake up the amygdala and cause your brain to write down things faster. So designing really exciting experiences, I try to design, I don't know, 5 or 6 a year. And they don't always go as planned,
yeah,
but
yeah.
uh, what could you do with your family that would be out of the ordinary? Just don't tell them.
Mm, yeah.
I'll answer your question with a super short story. Client of mine was like, "Oh, my son's going to turn 12, and I want to do something really memorable for his 12th." Lived in Australia. Dad's from London. Son follows a London football club,
Mm,
soccer in the US. And son's a huge fan of his dad's favorite club. So he's been
mm,
wearing the jersey since he's five
mm.
years old. He's never been to London. He's never been out of Australia.
Yeah.
So dad says, "We're going somewhere. Pack your bags." They get in a plane on a Friday. Son doesn't know even where they're going. They're like, "Wait a minute, we're going to London?
Mm,
Why?" You'll see
mm,
when we get there.
mm,
So risk and uncertainty, some uniqueness. They land, they get in the Uber, they go to the stadium. Now he knows why they're there. He recognizes the stadium.
mm.
But here's the kicker. They don't go on the front entrance. They go around back. The entire team files out, lines up against the wall, holds a
Mm,
jersey. His son puts on the jersey. He goes into the stadium with the team. He sits with them. He warms up with them. He talks with them during the game. He gets his jersey signed by everybody.
mm,
Dad bought him
mm.
that, right?
Wow.
Probably cost a pretty penny, but he
Mm.
was the mascot for the day.
Yeah,
Dad can't tell the story without crying. I'm sure son will remember it for the rest of his life.
for the rest
These
of
are
his
the
life.
kind of things you can
Absolutely.
design.
Absolutely. Create experiences for everybody. And that's such a powerful story. Thank you. But on that note, John, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation I've had with you. What a fascinating journey you've had, and how beautifully you seem to have incorporated so many different elements of your journey. Of course, you said there's one, your dinner conversation as a TV host is what sparked a big change, but just being a silver medalist in the Olympics is a huge achievement that not very many people can say they have got there. Thank you for giving me such incredible pointers on managing time. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.